Well, President Obama making a hard sell to Democratic lawmakers and grassroots supporters to push the Iran nuclear deal through Congress. This as Secretary of State John Kerry vigorously defends the deal on Capitol Hill this week, warning about the consequences of not moving forward with an agreement. Take a listen.
So in the real world, we have two options. Either we move ahead with this agreement to ensure that Iran's nuclear program is limited, rigorously scrutinized, and wholly peaceful, or we have no agreement at all. No inspections, no restraints, no sanctions, no knowledge of what they're doing, and they start to enrich.
And joining us now, Congressman Ed Royce, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Welcome, sir. Great to have you back on the program.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk for a moment about some of the fallout from this week's hearing. You heard Secretary of State Kerry there saying that if this deal doesn't go through, basically all is lost. How do you respond to this?
I cannot believe how many cards we had in this game that he's thrown away, including the tough negotiating position that the United States had going into the agreement. We had the capacity of putting additional sanctions on Iran, which we had passed through the House, 400 to 20, that Secretary of State Kerry insisted not go into effect. They actually blocked that in the Senate. They had Senator Reid block that provision. He argued with me on that issue that we had already, frankly, been threatening with the Ayatollah, and he wanted to extend an olive branch. What has that olive branch got us, except into a situation now where we've gotten less and less leverage, and he's going to the United Nations now and lifting the sanctions before coming to Congress to have the representatives vote on this? I think we get a pretty good idea just how badly he's negotiated this.
So at this moment, were you able to figure out this issue about whether or not Americans are going to be allowed on these inspection sites? Because Susan Rice continuing to say that no Americans are going to be allowed to inspect the military sites there with this deal. How is that possible at this point?
Uma, I will believe that the IAEA has actually the ability to inspect when I see it in writing. And at this point in the side agreements, the administration is telling us we can't produce that for you to see. At this point, the questions that the international inspectors have asked, and there's been 12 of these questions that we haven't gotten answered for years. They've got 1,000 pages of documents on Iran's tests and attempts to build a nuclear warhead. They want answers. We haven't gotten answers yet to any of this, and now we're told there's side agreements which Congress hasn't seen on the deal. I'll believe it when I see it, that we actually have verification, even in this agreement, for inspectors to go anywhere, anytime. I think we ended up getting rolled on that part of the agreement as well, and this is why Congress is upset with the way in which the Secretary of State has conducted this negotiation.
You know, and you bring up the issue of side deals, and during the hearings, it appeared as though John Kerry himself had not read the actual side deal itself that has been made with the IAEA. And when pressed, he was basically saying, well, you know, it's there. I basically don't really know all that's there, but yeah, there is a side deal.
Doesn't it look to you like he couldn't get an agreement with the Iranians which would allow the real verification that we want and get those answers answered? And so instead he left it up for the Iranians and the IAEA to separately negotiate this, apparently in a way in which we in Congress haven't seen a copy of it. This strikes me as almost malfeasance if you add it to the fact that in the 11th hour of this negotiation, they also negotiated away our ability to keep the arms embargo on the ballistic missile system that Iran wants to develop. And they're going to lift that in 8 years. So I would just ask you, when you have an administration that is pulling down our ballistic missile defense system here, pulled us out of Poland, pulled us out of the Czech Republic, canceled those provisions to defend the homeland, and now we find out that somehow in this agreement, at the tail end of the agreement, they concur with this idea of lifting the embargo on the intercontinental ballistic missile work, which Iran seeks to obtain with help from Russia. These are the issues which we're wrestling with right now, and this is why I would like to see the American public pay more attention to this agreement. This is why we've held these hearings. We're going to continue to hold them in order to get the information out, and we want former military officials to be testifying, and we want to hear more from them as well in terms of our national security interests here.
When you say you have not been able to see anything about these side deals, where do things stand at this point? I know you're pressing for that information.
That's right.
What are they telling you? Are they saying we'll get it to you by a certain date or a deadline? I mean, what's the status at this point?
Well, you've heard some of the debate in the committee hearing, which lasted close to 4 hours. We're going to go back into session, go back with administration officials, try to get those documents, try to get to the bottom of more of this. But in the meantime, I think it behooves us to pay close attention to the words of the Secretary of Defense when he talked about, for example, the arms embargo portion of this. He said the reason we do not want Iran to get ICBMs is because the I in that word stands for intercontinental, which means launched from Iran to the United States. That's our concern. So if at the end of 10 years in this agreement, they're on the threshold of being a nuclear weapons state, and at that point we've lifted all the sanctions. The sanctions lifting, I suspect, is going to end up being permanent in this, and yet they're then able to go forward with an industrial capacity program. The only other aspect they need is that capability with the ballistic missiles, and if they've gotten that in the agreement, then we've really been snookered in terms of our negotiation there with the Iranians. And these are the details that the House and Senate are looking at right now.
I have just a few seconds. At this point, are you able to see skeptical lawmakers, colleagues right now supporting this or going against it? How do you see this thing breaking down at this point? Are there more converts?
I think you see a lot of skepticism on both sides of the aisle. The new polling that we've seen come out now with 52% of the public against this agreement, 44% in support. That is a big shift from the original announcement before people knew any of the details in the agreement. And I think all of this, including the additional debate, as people go back to their districts now and hold their town hall meetings and hear from their constituents on this subject, is going to drive more of a focus on the question of the details in this agreement and what the long-term consequences would be for our national security.
All right, Chairman Royce, always great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really do appreciate it.